Hey everybody, this is Bob Fischer. I'm at the Agile 2023 conference. I'm here with Jim Highsmith, one of the signers of the Agile Manifesto, author, and actually author of a recent book. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you've been involved, obviously, for a long period of time. What's top of mind for you, and what in particular were you trying to accomplish with your recent book?
Well, one of the things I was trying to accomplish with the book is to give people a sense of the history of software development through my own experiences. Back in the day when basically our technical stack was an operating system and a compiler, and input was punch cards and the output was a printed sheet. And to give somebody a perspective of how that impacted software development then and now. So for example, in a technology sense, when I was designing electrical circuits as an engineer in the mid-60s, the transistors were about the size of the end of my finger. Now you can get 5 billion on a chip. And those sort of numbers, it changes a lot of what you can do and what you can't do. You couldn't do Agile back when it took 12 hours after you hit the enter switch to get a result out. So I think I wanted to give people some historical perspective. And then I also started writing the last chapter, and I thought, well, maybe I ought to predict some things about the future. And I thought, that's madness. Things are changing too fast. So I really looked at history as a way to help prepare for the future, not to predict the future. But if you look at the trends in terms of the changes and the number of changes and the volume of changes that are coming down the pike, then one of the things that people have throughout a business have got to be agile. They've got to be agility has got to be part of what they do and how they work. And so that's really my current focus.
So what you mentioned it over lunch, we had a chance to briefly talk, but you're also starting to do some research and investigate other things. What are the things what's driving your personal interest these days? Where are you headed?
I have two flavors of things that I'm working on, and they're somewhat connected. One is that I think, and I've been more involved in the Agile community since I've been writing this book than I have in the last few years, but it seems to me that Agile's been around for 20 plus years, and people are beginning to question whether or not it's still valid. And what I'd like to say is, let's figure out what parts of it need to be retained, like the core values, and then where do we need to extend it? So explain to people who haven't been involved in Agile before what Agile mindset, what Agile really is all about, and then show them how to extend that into what they're doing today. So that's one area, sort of a rejuvenation of Agile. The second area I'm really concerned about or interested in is business agility. So not just the Agile, not just the IT area, but what about the business itself? And there's some unique issues in the business community that I think a lot of Agilists aren't really knowledgeable about. And so I'm hoping to do some writing in this whole area of business agility and what Agile means to a business as opposed to just the software development.
And as you've been looking at this, are there any particular things that are notable that you're noticing where there is that gap between what the technology group is doing to bring products to market and where the rest of the business is thinking? Where do you see some of the strains and stresses are?
Well, I think they're all up and down the line, but even the stresses in the C-suite. I just read a book by Jenny Romney, who was a CEO of IBM for 8 years until she retired a couple of years ago. And she just wrote a book called Good Power. And it talks about her time at IBM and how she tried to steer the ship of IBM from the CEO's perspective, and how difficult it is, even if you're on top of the organization, you still run a lot of organizational obstacles. And even in the way companies are financed and run by Wall Street today, that are always looking at quarterly earnings and quarterly earnings growth as opposed to long-term, what's going to benefit the company long-term. And so there are pressures on the executive suite that a lot of us don't get involved with, but they impact how you're going to be more agile in your whole business.
So have you started to see patterns of how they can still be able to operate with an agile mindset while still being driven by the board?
Yeah. In other words, you have to take what you can get. And I think that's the way the agile movement has kind of grown. I mean, we started off in the early, just after the manifesto was written, we worked with teams, and I call that the rogue team period, where you had teams within organizations that were trying to do Agile, but they were somewhat doing it in spite of what management wanted. So they would get dispensation, or maybe they wouldn't. And Mike Cohn told me a funny story about, he went into an organization in 2003, 2004, and the VP of IT said, "Yeah, I have 3 Agile teams that are going." And Mike went down and visited with the teams and came back at the end of the day and said, "You have 4 teams." And the IT manager said, "No, I have 3. Mike said, "You have one hidden behind the corner over there." And so that was kind of the rogue team era. And then you had some executives, VPs of engineering and directors of IT, CIOs, who started saying, "I want to bring my whole organization into the Agile sphere." And that was sort of the second period from 2005 to 2010. And so you get you take what you can get. If all you can do is a few teams, you try a few teams. If you're trying to do the entire organization, that's a different level, but you need the right leadership at each level in order to carry that off. Well, one of the characteristics I think a leader has to have is some adventurousness. It's got to be willing to take a little risk and adventure into an area, explore into an area that maybe you haven't been in before, and that involves some risk, but that's also going to be the way you're going to make it to the next level. In the book, I have the period from 2005 to 2010 was the era of courageous leaders who would lead their organizations into a different way of doing something. And I think building capability is certainly part of that, as is a kind of an adventurous spirit. So I think those are both necessary. And I agree that you need those kinds of leaders at every level, at the team level, at the project management level, at the second or third level management, all the way up to the CEO. And one of the things that impresses me about what you just said is this guy was willing to, he didn't send his managers off to a management class. He led the management class. And that's getting very involved, and that's kind of practicing what he's preaching.
So you're in the middle of preparing to write a few articles. What's kind of gelling together? What's the thing that you're like, I'm starting to see something here that feels like this is a thing, and I want to write about this?
Well, one of the things is that I look through a lot of the material on business agility, and there are a number of people around here that I know pretty well that are sort of into this. It occurred to me that there are a lot of people that are like me, or consultant, or academic, or pundit, who are trying to say what Agile leadership is all about and push it up the ladder to the upper leaders and say, this is the kind of leader you should be. And what I'm interested in is figuring out from the C-level suite what they think leadership is all about, and can we learn from them rather than trying to teach them. And so I've got lined up several different people that I'm going to talk to and try to get perspective from the C-suite level as to what they consider to be agility or Agile leadership, or just how do they respond to change in the marketplace that's going on today. So in my career, I've been a software developer, I've been a project manager, I've been a product manager, I've been a VP of sales and marketing, I've headed up a consulting organization, I've been VP of Agile project management for a consulting organization, and one of the most interesting of those was the sales and marketing VP for a couple of years. Now, it was a high-tech startup, but it was a very different kind of position. And one of the things that I did during that period, because I've filled all those roles, is I've gotten an appreciation for what other people need, what the pressures on them are. So, for example, when I was VP of sales and marketing, I was working for a small company, a couple $1 million company, and I sat down with a bunch of people from a big company on the West Coast and negotiated a contract. And I knew that if I didn't get that contract signed, we might not make payroll in the next month. And that's the kind of pressure I never had as a project manager in IT. It's a whole different kind of pressure, and it gave me a real different respect for marketing and salespeople. And I think sometimes when you haven't lived in somebody's shoes, you don't really understand why they do things and all the pressures and constraints on them.
So essentially building a company of empathy where people are concerned about each other's concerns, particularly where does the leader look from and where does the leader focus? that could be really groundbreaking.
It is. And one of the things I got out of Jenny Lamety's book is her balancing performance and empathy. That she demanded high performance from people who worked for her, but she also had empathy for people, in a way that a lot of CEOs might not. And I think as I read through some books by a number of CEOs and senior executives, that's, for some of the more modern ones, that's coming through, that the balance. And it can't be all empathy and it can't be all performance. You gotta have a balance in there. And I think that's an important skill or balancing point for leaders up and down the chain. And I think because of the climate when the Agile Manifesto was written, which was 20-some years ago, and it was a particular climate, particular business climate, I think things like self-organizing teams and better workplaces and empathy and some other kinds of things, we may have overgone in that area to the detriment of performance. But I think they've got to be balanced.
I like what you're saying, because if you don't balance empathy, so performance for me is a clear way of saying what's actually important, and are we registering something on the scale of it actually being important? Can we tell that that thing is really working, or not tell if that thing is working? And I think without those, you can't actually really have an agile team or team of teams or anything, because you don't know what the goal is.
That's right. And if you have no accountability, in other words, accountability goes with autonomy and self-organization and all those kinds of good things. But you've got to be accountable. And that's what I found sometimes is that the agile teams don't understand management's accountabilities, and they don't try to understand. They basically, like I said, they want to make it perfect from their perspective. And that's not the way it really works.
First of all, I'm very interested in reading the things that you put together, because it feels like you'll be closing a gap that's been a critical gap for a long period of time by just essentially having the organization be able to line up behind what is it that we're trying to do, not what they're trying to do, which is different from what I'm trying to do.
So you've got to measure what's really important, which is customer value, and the rest of it is internal metrics for the team.
So I'm conscious of the fact that you had another meeting that you have to go to. Is there anything that I didn't cover that you wish we talked about?
In the book, I really have 5 themes that are running together. A history of software development, my experiences with that, and by the way, I call it a history, not the history, because it really is tied in with my experiences. The third thing I bring into that is I try to honor the pioneers of each era. So people like Tom DeMarco and Larry Constantine from the structured area. And of course, people like Kent Beck and Martin Fowler from the Agile era. So I think acknowledging those pioneers is really important. And then how both business advances and changes and technology impact software development. And so that was a real challenge to put those 5 threads together, but I think they're all important in terms of understanding the history. So I want people to not know what happened in terms of the Agile Manifesto, but I want them to know why it happened. What were the conditions in the world that made that a thing that needed to happen? It probably would have happened somehow, even if we hadn't ever gotten together and written the manifesto.
Well, I admit I haven't read the book, and I'm also going to go out and make sure that I get it right after this talk, because you've inspired me. And also, too, I think so you said jimhighsmith.com has, so as you're publishing new articles and whatever your current thinking is that one of the best places to follow you? Or
either there or LinkedIn.
Okay.
And occasionally I'll write on Medium, but LinkedIn has been a primary avenue for me.
Great. Well, hey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's terrific so after, we know people in common and people, but we haven't actually ever met. So I really appreciate the chance to be able to speak with you, and best wishes with both this book and the future research, because something needs to bridge the gap that still exists in most organizations. So thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.